introduce you to the third machine in my vintage sewing machine collection. This is a Singer 301-1A. On the machine it just says a 301A, and I'll explain what the dashes are in a few minutes. Now this machine has a really interesting story, the 300 series. They came out right after the end of the war when things were kind of getting back to normal, and most manufacturers were still selling the same machines they were selling before the war. They hadn't really focused any on new machines. Singer, however, came out with something brand new in this area here. What they did is on the presser foot bar and the needle bar, they incorporated a 9-degree slant. And what they said that did is it made it a little bit easier and less fatiguing for the sewist or the seamstress, because you could look down at your work a little bit better. It brought it closer to it, and it wasn't directly on top of the machine. So you had a little bit better vision. And it was really a successful design for them. They sold in a lot of these particular machines. And they did come out with 3 of these. Now the first one was in 1951, and it was a 301, and they did commission 10,000 of those for their 100-year anniversary. In 1952, they started commissioning the remainder of them, and the 301-1, such as this one here, was made to be in a cabinet and portable, which is something really neat that they only did with this machine, and I don't know why, because it's a really interesting design. So this, if it was in a cabinet, would sit in a cradle in the cabinet. It didn't have screws to permanently put it in the cabinet. So what would happen is you'd put this in the cradle, you'd slide the back into the cradle, and then push the top down into a clip. When you wanted to remove it, you'd simply push the clip, pull it up, and slide the thing right out. It even had a handle right on the top built in order to make that a little bit easier. And for its time, it was also a lighter machine, so it wasn't quite as heavy as the other ones. Now this being the 301-1, which was made to be either in a cabinet or portable, both kind of sort of, it did have a 2-plug design. This is a 3-prong plug up here, and on the bottom you can't really see it very well because there's not a lot of light right on this side, but there is a 2-prong plug down here. This went to your foot pedal underneath the cabinet, and then you'd plug in the power up here. Currently I'm using a dual cord from my Featherweight because this did not come to me with its cords. I'm trying to find them. But luckily the Featherweight cord I have does work with this machine. Now the 301-2s did not have the 2-plug system. They had the 1 3-prong plug, such as what I'm using now. And that one was made to be portable. So that one pretty much you put it in a portable carrying case and took it around. I believe it was like a trapezoid suitcase looking thing. But that being aside, there was one more. There was a 301-3, which was made for educational purposes in high schools and sewing classrooms and so on and so forth. The educators really liked this because they said they could take the beating that new sewers would give to it and abuse and really just keep on going. So it was really a heavy-duty, sturdy machine for its time. And for me, it's one of my favorites. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Other than this 9-degree slant system, the slant-o-matic system there, everything else is not that dissimilar from their other models. You'll notice a lot of it is recognizable. We'll start here. This is your bobbin winder, and it does sort of hide down in the machine, which is kind of cool. You pull it up, and then the bobbin tire right here goes right up against the hand wheel, and then that's what winds your bobbin. There is a little stop motion clutch plate here, which you would hold this in place and then turn this about a quarter of a turn, and it would release the gears in here. Well, we just want to make the gears run so that the needle isn't going up and down when you're winding your bobbin. And then when you're done, you just turn it back, and then everything will run and work again. It is supposed to have an automatic stop on the bobbin winder. I haven't used it yet so far. I've stopped all my bobbins before they've done the automatic, just because I've finished restoring this finally, and I've only been test sewing the machines, so I haven't been filling my bobbins up all the way. Now on this bobbin winder, it does have a little tension wire, so when you put your bobbins on here, it will hold them on. There's no additional little slide that comes in. When you're done, it just hides right back down in here. So pretty standard. Here is your stitch length Regulator. Goes from 6 all the way up to 30, which is a really small fine stitch, and it does a great job at that. Past this line here, when you get past that line up into this area, you are now in your reverse and your back tacking. So pretty standard there. Now, what you have down here I thought was kind of cool. They have already put in this spool pin here so that when you wind a bobbin, you don't have to go across the whole machine. You're going to go from the spool through this little tension disc area here straight up to your bobbin. And speaking of the spools, these have really interesting spool pins. They build it as unbreakable, and it's kind of almost like a spring. And they don't come out, they're sort of just mounted in there. There's one here, and then there's one up here in the back as well. And the spool pin back here was also an interesting change for them. I really like it. It goes down below the top of this machine. And the reason that is an advantage is because when you're using these new cross-wound spools for today, it actually makes a better stitch. It's not jumping up and down so much because it's lower. It's going right down through all of this tension assembly unit and the take-up lever and all of that without having to kind of pull at some weird odd angle. And then you have up here your little ports to go ahead and put in your oil, and here. There we go. Now this is where your light is, and they called it their Singer light system. There is a glass focusing, I wouldn't really call it a plate, but a piece of glass here, which actually focuses the light a little bit better. You can kind of see how it does that. It's got this focusing point right here, which is really interesting. It does have a standard bulb in there, and I am going to be replacing that with a LED bulb at some point. But as far as that goes, it's pretty much basic. It's pretty much what you can say. It is a straight stitch machine. It does wonderful, wonderful, amazing stitches. I actually have a sample here. Unfortunately, it's in white, but I'll probably just show you the stitches. Can't really see it very well. The only other thing we haven't really talked about is in the bobbin area. This is not a drop-in bobbin. This does have, just like the featherweights, underneath this lifted piece here, a vertical bobbin. And that was a little bit different for me because most of my other machines have a drop-in bobbin, but it works wonderfully. Don't have any problems with it at all. And pretty much that's what I have to say about the features of the Singer 301A. And I'll get ready to show you how it stitches. Before we get stitching, I'm going to show you a little bit about the bobbin on here. It's a little bit different than the others. This is your standard class 66 bobbin. This is a plastic version. This is a metal version of a class 66 bobbin. This particular machine, the 301 and the featherweights, took a special bobbin. It's just called a featherweight bobbin. I don't think it has a specific class number. You can see it's a little bit shorter than the class 66, and it's also a little bit just a titch, like barely at all wider. I mean, it's just a small amount wider. So when you're using a 301, you are going to want to make sure you get these featherweight bobbins. My favorite source for my bobbins is a place called the Featherweight Shop. They actually pre-test all their bobbins before they sell them, and when you get them, they come in these really handy storage tubes. So I really like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and show you how this stitches. Now, just so you know, this tripod is not all that stable on this table when the machine is running, so the tripod's going to shake a little, but you'll sort of get the point. I'm going to go ahead and drop my needle, drop my presser foot, hold my tails. You always want to hold your tails to keep them from getting pulled down under and into the bobbin and case and wrapped around. If you've ever had that happen to you, it's no fun. So let's go ahead and give this a go. It's just such a smooth machine. And as I said before, relatively quiet for its time. I'm going to pivot it. give you a quick run. So watch the camera, it's going to shake on you. But just to give you an idea of just how smooth this machine is. Now we are currently running about a number 8 stitch. And let me show you under the light here, if I can get it in the right spot, just how lovely those stitches are. Maybe I can spotlight it here for you. I don't know if that helps any. Just a wonderful, beautiful stitch. Both one side and on the other side. I kind of ran over the same stitch twice there, so you're just looking here. I'm going to do a little bit of a wider stitch and a smaller stitch so you can see. Let's go down to a 6. Give it a quick run. And I'm going to put it all the way up at a 30. This is the smallest stitch. These vintage singers could really make a small stitch, I tell you what. Alright, let's have a look here. Now this is the front. See if I can zoom in for you. Here was the larger stitch, and they're just beautiful. And then these really little itty bitty tiny stitches here on a number 30. And on the back side, they are just as lovely. Did a really, really great job on them. Okay, I'm going to show you another nice thing about these vintage singers. And by the way, here you can see a perfect example of what Singer called their focused light, their focused glass point on their Singer lights. Kind of just focuses right in there on where you're stitching. Now, because these vintage Singers had a smaller number of feed dogs, just two rows, one long row, one short row, it made the fabric so easy to maneuver around. And we're going to see a little bit about how that works. I'm going to put us down to a 6. See just how maneuverable these are. So easy to move around. And you can see all of the lovely stitching there. Wished I'd used a darker thread, you could have seen better. And there is a little bit of information on the Singer 301A.